Good morning. Pastor Greg here, Faith Lutheran Church, Harvey, North Dakota, here to give you my midweek message for you to hear. Thanks for taking a moment to join me, listen to me, and hopefully be given some blessings through what I have to offer. It is, in fact, Wednesday, March 16th. The year's 2022. It's really quite interesting that we're already halfway through March, and it just seemed like we started it. So, how cool is that? The weather has become warm. We've been in the 40s, snow is melting, the sun is shining, and today we'll have a little breeze. So, we'll see how all that plays out over the next few days and just take the nice spring weather as it comes. Judy and I did notice that some of our tulips are starting to at least peek out that are right up next to the house because the house has warmed the soil there. So that's pretty exciting to maybe not very long from now see some color coming up from those. So exciting time. It's always in the spring when we see uh, the nature of what we live around come back to life after quite a long winter this year. Quite a few snowstorms, lots of wind, a little bit more than usual it seems like. But I'm not a meteorologist, so I might be wrong on that. So that's the way it is. Let's see. We are in Lent, so we're continuing our Lent services. Lent services are Wednesday evenings. We have a meal at 5:30, and then we have our service at 6:30. Typically somewhere between 20 and 25 minutes long. And then we move into our Wednesday evening Bible school. Although this week we won't have that, when our web's programming, because the school is on spring break tomorrow and Friday. So we'll look forward to a little extra time this evening, I guess. That's all right. So I remind you as well that my focus during Lent has been how we live and how we die, and of course that's based on how we do those two things as we live out our lives in the Lord. And so we've been walking through the Luke text the for the year and focusing on those aspects of the texts, and then intertwining the Lord's Prayer with it, and each petition or each line of the Lord's Prayer is a focus on any given evening. Now, this series is both for Sundays and Wednesdays, and so if you go to both, you'll get the whole series. If you don't go to both, you'll still be blessed with the information and the message that comes out of it, as we are reminded that we are living in Christ, or we should be living in Christ, as well as that we should be living or towards our death in Christ. And I've been enjoying those, working through these texts and giving you that message. So that's good news for us. Now, because of where I pulled this from, and because the pastor who gave us notes for providing these messages is Missouri Synod, we sometimes change the texts because they use different texts. So this Sunday, our psalm will be Psalm 85, and then the Old Testament lesson instead of Genesis will be Ezekiel 33, 7 through 20. The epistle and the gospel stay the same. So if you want to take a moment to take a look at those. Our gospel lesson is what I'll probably preach on, but today I just wanted to take a look at this 1 Corinthians text, our epistle lesson from Paul, and it's 1 Corinthians 10, 1 through 13. And so I'll take just a second to say, well, I'm not going to say anything more about what's going on in the church, and I'm going to mention this 1 Corinthians text. You can take a moment to read it. Come back with me if you want. So it's interesting, the heading in the ESV for this text for 1 Corinthians says warning against idolatry. Well, we always think, well, that's easy to do, right? Idolatry, that's easy to do. We can keep away from that. Well, not when you start to think about what is your idolatry. And so we have, we have idols of all kinds of things. We have them for in our the money that we make. We have idolatry in animals. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that we lift higher than the Lord, and that's really what that's about. But what I wanted to mention is and I didn't remember which text this comes from or which Bible translation this comes from, but the heading was, you want to talk about the good old days. And I thought that was interesting as I read this text and thinking about it. And it's Paul, and just to kind of give you a feel for what it is, it says, "For I do not want you to be unaware, brothers," that could be brothers and sisters, "that our fathers were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and the sea, and all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. Nevertheless, with most of them God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness." That's the first 5 verses. So it's interesting that we have this idea that people and especially the Israelites and the Jewish people would always look back to the fathers, to Moses, and say, well, we're following Moses' rule and all of these things, and Paul's reminding them of the things that have happened to them over the period of time, that these things have happened, and you keep looking back towards them. And he writes in verse 11, "Now these things happened to them as an example, but they were written down for our instruction, on whom the end of the ages has come." And then 12, "Therefore let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall." How many times do we focus more on the good old days than today? Or maybe even to look a little bit towards tomorrow, but we're called to live for today. And it's interesting that when we were younger, we were creating our good old days, and so today we're creating our good old days that we will look back in 10, 15, or 20 years for some of us. And so I find it interesting that we want to live back where our roots come from all the time, and that's okay. We're supposed to look back, and that's who we are. That's where we came from, and that's where we should focus in some instances. But when it comes to the Lord, the good old days, they were making mistakes, and we continue to make mistakes. But where is our focus? What part of the good old days are we focusing on? Are we focusing on the good old days of Christ's death and his resurrection? Or are we focusing on the things that we can really grasp? And we talk about the good old days that I remember when I did this, and I remember when I did that. But we're not to look to that. We're to look to Christ. We're to look to Jesus. And this idea of, "Therefore let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall," because when we secure our roots in the good old days, we might not be where we're supposed to be, and that's in Christ. And that's kind of the focus of the whole Lenten series. Are you preparing to live your life in the good old days, or are you living now in Christ? And are you preparing to live life in in uh, in your death, so you know where you'll be, the promises that He's offering, or are you securing your future by things of today? Um, Making sure you have enough money in the bank, all of these things are taken care of. Those things aren't bad, but they just won't do anything when you're dead and when you've moved on. So Paul reminds us to live in Christ and in today, um, and not to be tempted as they were in the old days, but to be living in Christ and knowing that in those temptations of the good old days, that Christ gives us an out through the grace that he provides for us. And that's really, really what we should be focusing on. So that's what I've got to say about that. It's very incomplete thoughts. Just something that kind of caught my attention, made me want to think about it for a little bit. So I hope you think about it for a little bit and just wonder maybe if something comes up from it for you. So blessings to you in those words. Prayers for the day. Again, I want to continue to pray for our ranchers. They're of course continuing through calving season, and so there's that gift of life there, gift of life in new calves, and there are calves, of course, that don't make it, and that's a travesty for those farmers. They do care for their animals. They do want to see live animals. So pray for them. Keep them in your thoughts as they go forward. And then the farmers who are preparing to ramp up for seeding, it's not really that far away. As soon as the ground warms up enough and the snow gets off, and they can begin that process of planting new life. How cool is that? Pray for somebody, one person, pick them out, pray for them, and lift them up. In just give them heap praises of good thoughts and good wills to them, so that they know that they can feel that the Lord is working in them. So that's that. All right, grace, peace, and blessings to you on this week. I look forward to the moment that we come back together again. And as I always say, do take care.